Alright, so good afternoon, everyone. We are now on lesson 8, Scuffle of Opinions in Writing and Editorials. But before anything else, I hope you're doing great today, everyone. And thank you for attending and being present for today's class. So, right, let's now move forward. So, I have set our objectives for today. I hope we can get through this. We can get throughout the discussion. So first, we will be defining editorial and its concept. Second is examining the other characteristics and functions of an editorial. And third, identify the types of editorials. So here are the presentation of the entire content. This is the major pointers that we will be learning today. So we'll be needing to know what is editorial. Next is what are the characteristics that involve in an editorial writing. Then following with the functions of editorial and the types of an editorial. So first, let us examine this scenario. As a Filipino student, you might have experienced getting into a class divided into opposite positions on an issue. For instance, if there were 40 in a class debating and which is more popular, GMA 7 or ABS 7 Channel 2. Say for example, there are 25 students who are deciding to side on ABS-CBN Channel 2, while 15 were on the side of GMA network. Then Group 1 started to prove or provide pieces of evidences why ABS-CBN was better. One member of the group from the ABS-CBN again talked about the latest Nielsen survey that the network's audience share was then higher than the other. Another member from ABS-CBN again, or from the group of ABS-CBN, talked about lengthier time for commercials due to numerous sponsors of ABS-CBN. While on the other side, on the GMA, a member from GMA side stood and pointed out that GMA had been producing more blockbuster films than the other network. Now, before the bell rang, Catch Group had commented a punchy tirade to defend their respective positions. Now, I'll just give you a little trivia in line to these two broadcasting companies. Now, we all know, or probably others might not know, there are known two meanings of GMA. First is Greater Manila Area, which refers to the initial coverage of the station. Now, GMA widened. The meaning of its acronym was changed into Global Media Arts because they already expanded their broadcasting company. Now, on the other side, ABS-CBN or Alto Broadcasting System and Chronicle Broadcasting Network. So we all know this is ABS-CBN. There is no longer ABS-CBN network today, right? Because of the issue of unrenewed franchise. But as ABS-CBN continues its fight for the franchise renewal, the network has announced the return of its shows through the Kapamilya channel, which will be available on cable and satellite. Now, so that's it. So let's continue. From the situation in the first slide, let us elicit the concept and the elements that are embedded in an editorial. First, an editorial should be based on an issue. Such issue should be timely and should have a high degree of sensibility and relevance to the reading public. In a given situation, the practical issue was all about which network was better, right? Now, second, There should be a group of cluster of minds analyzing a given issue. In the case of the example in the previous slide, in the scenario, there was a GMA's group, and also in ABS-CBN group. Third, there should be a stand. So the identified group should have a position on the issue, right? There should be a position. The story gives a clear understanding that Group 1 defends for ABS-CBN, while the other group sturdily stood for GMA 7. Number 4, there should be pieces of evidences. You provide proofs. If you reread the story, it would give you a situation where the members were given specific pieces of evidences to support their claims. Now let's proceed. So, from among the elements, it can be hard that an editorial is an article that states the concerted opinions or single stand of the publication's staff on a particular issue. Further, an editorial reflects the majority vote of the editorial board, the governing body of the newspaper. It is usually unsigned without a byline, like a lawyer. So editorial writers build on an argument and try to persuade readers to think the same way they do. No? And editorials are meant to influence public opinion, promote critical thinking, and sometimes cause people to take action on an issue. So in sense, an editorial is an opinionated news story. Now let's continue. So to put it into a more comprehensive way of defining what an editorial is, here is a comprehensive definition. So editorial, it is a concise expression of facts and opinions or an analytical interpretation of significant and timely topics or issues. It is logical and pleasing to influence opinion or to interpret significant news such that its importance to the reader will be clear. It is treated with formality through an editorial. The paper has the opportunity to write what it thinks about the issue affecting the readers. If the editorial is well written, it can be a vital force to make changes and reforms. Alright, so let's proceed. Okay, so we are now on the next pointer, the other characteristics of an editorial. So, number one characteristics of an editorial is that it follows a pattern. So, an editorial is an essay like a feature story. So, this means that the editorial article should bear an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So, as what you can project, it follows a pattern. There is a body, there is an introduction, there is a body, and a conclusion. So that's what makes it complete. Alright, so let's proceed. Number 2, it simplifies an issue. An editorial is an objective explanation of the hottest issue within the coverage of paper's release. Hence, it usually simplifies the complex issues by eliminating the extraneous parts of the news. In other words, it puts the news in its proper perspective. Say, for example, the hottest news is about the imposing of higher grading system in the school or in the university. No? An editorial may talk about its causes and effects to the students, teachers, and also the stakeholders. That simplifies an issue. Now let's move forward to number 3. So it provides opinions from the opposing viewpoints. So although an editorial showcases a stand of of the paper, it attempts to be objective by presenting views that refute directly the same issues the group addresses. Now, number 4, it shows evidence delivered in a professional and formal manner. So, formality encompasses the use of language and the style of argumentation. Good editorials engage issues, not personalities. So it refrains from name calling or other petty tactics of persuasion like stereotyping, ad hominem, ad baculum, and others. Feature writing bears a set of loosely rules in the use of language. That is, the writer may expound the idea by using creative language. So in contrast, editorial writing is direct to the point and yields a serious tone. So next is number 5. It offers alternative solutions. So one prime function of editorials is to effectuate change in others' beliefs and stance. No? The editorial does this by offering a suggestion to remedy the problem or issue being criticized. Anyone can grip about a problem, but a good editorial should take a proactive approach to make the situation better by using constructive criticism and giving a solution. So constructive in a sense that you are positively contributing effective possible approach or ways to the problem in order to cure it, right? So it offers an alternative solutions. Next is number 6. All right. So it proffers a solid and concise conclusion. So towards the end of the editorial often lies the powerfully summarized opinion. In other words, it gives the reader an unforgettable punch that they can live by. So that's it. After presenting all of it, there should be a summarization or a concise conclusion, a concrete conclusion to make your paper or the paper more comprehensive and defended. So let's now proceed to the functions of editorial. Okay, so editors often use editorials to explain the way the newspaper covered a sensitive or controversial subject. Now, in a school setting, the publication may explain new school rules or a particular student body effort like a fund drive. Alright, so number 2, criticize. As discussed, editorials constructively criticize actions, decisions, or situations while providing solutions to the problem identified. The purpose of doing so is to get readers to see the problem and not the solution, right? Criticize. Next is persuade. An editorial primarily aims at driving the reader to crusade with the paper's stand. Alright, so take note that in the first chapter of this book, journalism is viewed to effectuate change. Hence, the paper's task, being in the realm of journalism, is to encourage others to take a specific positive action. Let's now proceed to number 4, praise. So praise. Editorials are also used to commend people and organizations for having contributed something to champion progress, development, and peace. So, in the context of campus paper or campus journalism, editorials may praise the initiative of the students' body to raise funds for the erection of a new dormitory. So, erection which means that constructing or building a new dormitory, or sometimes students solicit money to those people who are in the politics so that they could raise a fund for a specific project. Okay. All right, so let's proceed now to the types of editorial. Okay. So the first type of editorial is what we call editorial of interpretation. So it explains the significance or meaning of a news event, current ideas, condition, or situation, theory, or hypothesis. The writer does not argue nor criticize, but merely present both sides of an issue and leaves the judgment to the readers. So the main aim of this editorial is to put proper perspective. The paper may take a neutral stand on the specified issue, and the news in its may give the responsibility of choosing a side to the readers themselves. So here is the example of an editorial of interpretation. Now let's move forward to editorial of criticism. So by criticism, it means that the editorial points out the faults in a situation or in an issue mentioned in a news. So it uses a scientific method by defining the problem, examining the evidences available, and then perhaps suggesting a solution to a problem. Okay, so that is the editorial of criticism. So here is the example, another example of editorial of criticism. So I got this from Sarangani Tribute 2019 by Bral Regidor. It's a campus paper. Now let's proceed to number 3. So editorial of argumentation or persuasion. So this type of editorial is the most common type being used in the dailies. Okay, following the principles of argumentation and debate, this type of editorial takes a stand in a controversial issue and tries to convince the reader to adopt this stand. So here is the example of editorial of argumentation or persuasion. Now let's proceed to number 4. So editorial of commendation or tribute. So commendation from the word commend, to praise a worthy deed, or to recognize, to acknowledge those people who gave such important steps in making a project, establishing or constructing establishments or buildings, or many more. So editorials may be used to praise a worthy deed done by a person or by an institution. The paper should qualify the tribute and therefore see that such contribution impacts on the lives of the reading public or the academic community. So that is editorial of commendation or tribute. So here is the example of editorial of commendation or tribute. So I also got this from Sarangani Tribute 2019 by Brad Regidor, campus paper. Now let's move forward to editorial of entertainment. So some editorials also discuss issues slightly but often have a serious point gently and subtly suggested and sometimes satirically. So what do we mean by satirically? So it's like it suggests that the stories or information transforms into a humorous manner to entertain the readers. So that is satirical. To entertain the people, to engage the people. Now, let's move forward to example. So, I also got this from Sarangani Tribute 2019 by Brad Regidor. Sana all principle. optimism encapsulated in meme slang. Now let's proceed to number 6, editorial of crusade. So this editorial usually endorses a thought or course of action. It promotes a concept, an idea, or an advocacy. This is also called a campaign editorial. So here is the example of editorial of crusade. So I also got this from that paper, that campus paper from Braille Regidor. Now let's proceed to number 7. Okay. Editorial liners. So editorial liners, these are short, witty paragraphs, either serious or light. So here's an example of an editorial liners. Love is looking up to fun in mother's smile. It's running and kissing father's hand to deserve his package. It's thinking and dreaming about a love one day and night. It's doing things to please the other. It's answering and writing love letters on perfumed paper. It's crying and brooding over careless words. It's rejoicing and walking in clouds on hearing sweet things. It's loving happily day by day. Alright, so that is the example of an editorial liners. So before ending my part, let's have a recapping of our pointers. Okay, so in the previous slide, we have tackled that there are other characteristics of an editorial. So first, it follows a pattern. Second is it simplifies an issue. Third is it provides opinions from opposing viewpoints. Number 4 is that it shows evidence delivered in a professional and formal manner. And number 5, it offers alternative solutions. Now let's proceed to the functions of editorial. So we also have explain or interpret. Second is criticize. Third is persuade. Fourth is praise. Now, on the types of editorial, there are 7 types of editorial. So first is editorial of interpretation. Second is editorial of criticism. Third is editorial of argumentation or persuasion. Number 4 is editorial of commendation or tribute. And number 5 is editorial of entertainment. And then number 6 is editorial of crusade. And also number 7, editorial liners. So that's on my part. I hope you have cultivated something from me. Thank you so much for listening. So here is my next co-reporter, Pauline Grace Mendoza Castro, along with the following topics. Please don't hesitate to ask any question, and please do bear with us. Thank you.
Good day once again. How are you all keeping up with our topic? I hope all of you are getting everything so far. This is Pauline Grace Mendoza Castro, and I'm going to continue our discussion. So let us tackle the editorial structure. So what is the editorial structure? So editorial structure is actually similar to an essay. It has a thesis, it provides evidence, and supporting arguments that revolve around the thesis. Now, just like an essay, it has a title, which clearly identifies the topic. It has an introductory statement, which includes the writer's view on the issue. It has a body, which provides supporting evidence and examples. And of course, the conclusion, which restates the writer's view and provides a final appeal for the reader to agree with that view. Now, for you to understand and for you to picture out the structure more, here is an example. So as you can see on the top, there is the title, followed by the intro, the body, conclusion, and signature, which is optional. Now, who among you here wants to be an editorial writer? if any one of you aspires to be one, allow me to introduce to you the duties of an editorial writer. Number 1, present facts honestly and full. So, an editorial writer needs to present facts as they are, completely and truthfully. Number 2, draw objective conclusions from the stated facts, basing them upon the weight of the evidence and upon his or her considered concept of the greatest good. So, as an editorial writer, in making conclusions, you should be objective, no basing on the evidences that you presented. Though oftentimes we hear that editorials are opinions. But then, we should remember that editorials should still be objective and should still be supported with facts and evidences. Number 3, never be motivated by personal interest, nor use his or her influence to seek special favors for himself or herself or for others. So, as an editorial writer, you should do your duty free from any personal interest. You should never write anything for personal gain. Number 4, realize that he is not infallible. Now, infallible, what does infallible mean? So it means incapable of making mistakes or being wrong. So as an editorial writer, you should realize that you are not infallible, meaning you are not perfect, so you are capable of being wrong. So therefore, you should be open to corrections, criticisms, and suggestions. Number 5, regularly review his or her own conclusions in the light of all obtainable information. So, as someone imperfect expected to produce a just article, an editorial writer should regularly review his or her conclusions based on the facts that are readily available. Now, why? Why does an editorial writer need to review his or her conclusions? It is because for him or her to give out the best conclusion possible. Now, number 6, have the courage of well-founded conviction and democratic philosophy of life. So in the field of journalism, a writer's philosophy in life is important in maintaining the integrity of journalism. So an editorial writer should have the courage to convince readers based on facts, and his or her philosophy in life should be democratic. So what is democratic, by the way? So democratic, we mean that it is a person who believes in the political or social equality of all people. Number 7, support his colleagues in their adherence to highest standards of profession integrity. So an editorial writer should support his or her colleagues in achieving the highest standards in their careers, because at the end of the day, each one of them affects the integrity of their company. And aside from that, best quality journalism actually takes teamwork. Now, aren't you curious of how editorials are made? Now, if you are, lend me your ears and let us know the process of crafting the editorial. This is suggestions for students. Now, first stage is planning the editorial. So just like any process, an editorial starts also with planning. So what happens during the planning stage? Letter A, decide what issue you will write about and clearly define the issue. So first, you need to define the issue you want to work on. So this could be an issue you are passionate of, an issue that is in need of more discussion, an issue that is timely, and the like. Letter B, consider who your intended audience will be. So after determining your issue, you need to consider who will be reading your editorial. It may be the general readership, or it may be directed to particular people. Letter C, brainstorm a variety of strategies you can use to gain reader support for your view on the issue. Now that you have determined your issue and the target audience, you need to think of an approach that would convince readers to agree with you. Now, these might include acknowledgement of the reader's current viewpoint, listing benefits of the view you are promoting, providing reliable evidences, and of course, using sound reasoning. Letter D, develop logical and ethical arguments. Avoid purely emotional rhetoric. Remember, you are not a priest to moralize the issue and just mainly attack the emotion. So the arguments you should write must be logical and ethical, no? Not emotionally driven. Letter E, conduct necessary research both to gather information about the audience you are writing for and to collect evidence, example, and support for the view you are promoting. Now, before writing an editorial, it is important to do enough research necessary to know your audience and, of course, the view you are promoting. So, why do you need to do research? It is for you to know the best approach or strategy to use in writing. Letter F, develop an outline to follow before you begin writing. So before writing, in order to keep the article organized, free from errors, and coherent, the editorial writer should develop an outline first. An outline as the roadmap to avoid from being lost in the process of writing. So this is what the editorial outline should contain. First, we have the introduction. So the content of the introduction should have a brief history of the issue or statement of the background. It could be 1 to 2 sentences. Next is the reaction. It can be included in the introduction or be a separate paragraph. So it should contain the explanation of the position of the editorial staff and take a clear position. Next is the body. It should give the arguments that support your position and elaborate. Next is the rebuttal. It should acknowledge the views of the other side, giving counter arguments. And then lastly, recommend solutions, alternatives, and direction, and then state the paper's position. Now, next to the planning stage is writing the editorial. So what happens in the writing stage? Letter A, follow the pattern and style of editorial writing. Now, in most editorials, the opinion of the writer is given near the beginning, followed by the supporting evidence and reasoning. This is actually called the direct approach. Letter B, first person plural, we are, is most common in editorial writing and is appropriate in establishing the credibility of the board. So, the editorial actually represents the opinion of the board. It represents the integrity of the board. Thus, the first person plural voice should be used. Letter C, state your opinion briefly in the fashion of a thesis statement. Remember to explain the issue objectively as a reporter would and tell why this situation is important. So, the opinion should be stated concisely and the issue should be explained objectively. Letter D, give opposing viewpoint first with its quotations and facts. Then, refute the other side and develop your case using facts, details, figures, and quotations. So the opposing viewpoints must be introduced first with quotations and facts before developing your case. So what are the opposing viewpoints, by the way? So these are the views that are in conflict with the view you are trying to promote. So your article should not only mention your viewpoint, but also the views that are against it. Letter E, concede a point of the opposition. They must have some good points you can acknowledge that would make you look rational. Again, the whole editorial should not only focus on your side, but the other side should also be acknowledged for your article to be rational and fair. Letter F, repeat key phrases to reinforce an idea into the reader's minds. So, to keep your readers on track of your stand, key phrases should be repeated to prevent confusion and for important details of your article or editorial to be effectively established in the minds of the readers. Letter G, give realistic solution or solutions to the problem that goes beyond common knowledge. Encourage critical thinking and proactive reaction. So for your article to have a lasting impact to the readers, it should give out solutions that are beyond what is expected. It should spark critical thinking and proactive reaction. Letter H, wrap it up in a concluding punch that restates your opening remarks or thesis statement. So to maintain coherence in your paper, the conclusion should restate your thesis statement. In this way, the readers will remember the view you are trying to promote more. Letter I, keep it up to 300 to 500 words for beginners like you and make every word count. So for beginners, the editorial should be 300 to 500 words and every word should all contribute in creating a good article. Again, every word should count. Letter J, develop a strong introductory statement to capture the reader's attention and to state your opinion. Use a logical sequence for presenting your arguments and an effective conclusion to maximize the impact on the reader. So starting the editorial strong, presenting arguments in a logical sequence, and concluding it effectively is crucial for the article or editorial to leave a lasting impact in the minds of the readers. Now let us jump into the simple structure in editorial writing. First, start with the news tag with an objective explanation of the issue or controversy. In an editorial, first paragraph is usually called the news peg. A news peg is a brief statement about news event or issue upon which the editorial is based. So first, start with the news peg. So included in the news peg is the stand or your stand and reaction. And your reaction should be clear and concise. For instance, you tell right away if you agree or disagree about something, and then give your position at once. Number 2, present your opposition first. As the writer, you disagree with these viewpoints. Identify the people, specifically those who oppose you. Use facts and quotations to objectively state their opinions. You may opt to give a strong position of the opposition. You gain nothing in refuting a weak point. Now next is to present your opposition. Now in writing an editorial, one must always remember to present the opposition first. You can present a strong position of the opposition for you to refute that strong position, which will make your editorial strong as well. Number 3, directly refute the opposition's beliefs. You can begin your article with transition. Pull in facts and quotations from people who support your position. Concede a valid point of the opposition which will make you appear rational. One has considered all the options. Now, after presenting the opposition, you can directly refute the opposition's beliefs by quoting people who support your position and then conceding a valid point of the opposition for you to appear rational. So what is being rational, by the way? So rational is being based on or in accordance with reason or logic. And you want to be rational in making an editorial. Number 4, give other original reasons or analogies. In defense of your position, give reasons from strong to strongest order. use a literary or cultural allusion to or that lends to your credibility and perceived intelligence. So, in giving reasons, one must order the reasons from strong to strongest. And you can also use cultural allusions to further make the article credible and intelligently made. Number five, conclude with some punch. So give solutions to the problem or challenge the reader to be informed. A quotation can be effective, especially if from a respected source. A rhetorical question can also be an effective concluder. So, what is a rhetorical question, by the way? So, rhetorical question is a question asked to make a point rather than to get an answer. Examples: marriage is a wonderful institution, but who would want to live in an institution? Next example: if the government does not defend the interests of children, who will? Next example: if practice makes perfect and no one's perfect, then why practice? So these kinds of questions do not intend to get an answer, but to make a point. They provoke the emotions of readers, making the article to result in action or lasting impact. Now let us know some techniques in beginning the editorial. First is emphatic statement or maxim. Example: life isn't fair, but life is what we live for. So this statement is catchy because it is short, but it is memorable for it appears like a wise advice or reminder to the readers, making the article worthy to be read. Number two, a striking statement about the topic. Example: zero crime rate, peaceful, safe. These are some of the epithets attached to Batanes province. So this statement is striking because it directly describes Batanes, the topic, using words that grab the attention of the readers through shock or amazement. Zero crime rate, peaceful, and safe. These are actually big words that could shock or amaze the readers, making them interested in reading the whole editorial. Number three, a quotation. Example: many are called, but few are chosen. So the Bible tells. A quotation is a catchy beginning in an editorial because it will surely tap the emotions of people and it somehow gives an insight about what the article is all about. Moreover, a quotation means reference, which could add up to the credibility of the entire editorial. Number four, narration. Example: the 25th of April marked a singly job interview of the presidentiables as they engaged in the third and last round of debate in Pangasinan. So, a simple narration could be catchy in starting an editorial because people oftenly like direct to the point articles which give necessary information immediately. Number five, an order. Example: stop media killings. An order is a catchy beginning in an editorial because it provokes the emotions of people to act and further read what the whole editorial is all about. Number six, a question. Example: do you still remember when Rodrigo Duterte vowed country's criminality in 3 to 6 months? A question is actually a good way to begin an editorial because it stimulates the minds of the readers and they will be hooked to know the rest of the editorial. Number seven, poetic. Example: as the election nears, many Filipinos are still like small boats, tossed by the wind, yet innocent that half a kilometer away is a waterfall that may wallow them down to perpetual poverty. They need to say no to vote buying. Now, starting an editorial in a poetic way catches the attention of readers because readers often like reading something that is pleasing and creative, but at the same time deep, no? It is a meaningful way to start an editorial and sets the mood of the whole editorial. Number 8, prophecy. Example. If we do not listen to the cry of Mother Earth, you will wake up one morning wishing to live in Jupiter and Saturn. Now, starting an editorial in a prophecy warns the readers. It may give them the feeling of fear, but it will attract to finish the editorial out of curiosity. Number 9, reaction. Example. Never did we see the student council dip its fingers in the issue of amending the student manual. So starting an editorial with a reaction lures the readers because a reaction is always personal, and personal reactions always trigger the curiosity of readers. Number 10, analogy. Example. Like a stern ball cleaner, the newly elected president of the student council is trying to clean up the controversies attached to the organization. So starting the editorial with an analogy actually attracts the readers because analogy signifies intelligence and people like reading something that is logical. Now that ends my part. Thank you so much for listening. Let's move on to our next reporter, Mr. Antonio Escuadro.
So now let's move on to some techniques in ending the editorial. First, we have here the proverb. Proverb is a simple and insightful traditional saying that expresses a perceived truth based on common sense or example. Proverbs are often metaphorical and use formulaic language. For example, people look up to the home of Ivatans as an honest and safe haven. We must then prove that first impression is lasting. Next, we have the quotation. Quotation is remark or statement made by other people that intend to support the argument you have made in editorial. Ending editorials with a quotation can be effective and persuasive if it closely relates to the side of the issue you are supporting and especially if it comes from a respected source in the field. Readers are more likely to be convinced by a quotation made by an authority figure rather than someone with little knowledge on the subject. For example, if we think that education is expensive, let us take it from Will Durant, who said, "Education is a progressive discovery of our own ignorance. Do you want to stay ignorant?" So as you can see in the example, there is a quotation. Next is advice. Advice is a recommendation offered with regard to prudent future action. For example, we should start changing our system. Let us dress up and vote. So now let's move on to some techniques in persuasion. First, we have here the appeals. One persuasive technique is appealing to the audience emotions, fears, need to protect their family, desires to fit in, to be accepted, desire to protect animals and the environment, pride in our country and others. Appeals is important because it helps writers to build a stronger argument and be more persuasive in their writing. By identifying rhetorical appeals, writers can begin to understand when it is more appropriate to use one method over another. Next, we have the evidence. Using evidence is very persuasive as it makes the reader see the editorial writer as knowledgeable. Thus, the argument is more logical or reliable. One example of showing evidence is by providing statistics, expert opinions, research findings, and anecdotal evidence. For example, the latest study shows that 46.9% of women students marry at the age of 15 to 19, and that is according to statistics. So as you can see in the example, there is an evidence, and it is very important to make your news reliable. Number 3, the attacks. Attacks on opposing views or the people who hold them can persuade the readers by portraying views and beliefs which are contrary to the editorial board's conclusion as foolish, dangerous, uncaring, or deceitful. Using humor to make fun of these views can be particularly persuasive. Note that it can offend or alienate audience if overdone. Attacks can attempt to belittle or embarrass or just plain insult an opponent. The idea is that the weaker you can make your opposition appear, the stronger you and your contention will appear. So number 4, we have the rhetorical questions. These are questions that do not require an answer. They are asked for effect only. They engage the reader and encourage them to consider the issue and accept the editorial board's answer or imply that the answer is so obvious that anyone who disagrees is foolish. For example, do we want that we will only be the higher learning institution in the country which does not change its opening of classes? Rhetorical questions ask the readers to consider the possibilities of what may happen if your side of the issue ignored. They should be questions that make readers more intrigued by the issue. Rhetorical questions may not require a direct answer, and often they ask readers to think about consequences of inaction or ignorance. Number 5. The cause and effect. Arguments may claim that there is a cause and effect relationship when really there is just a relationship, and other factors should be considered. The cause and effect reasoning is generally persuasive as it helps answer the question why and something happens, making a statement objective and rational rather than a blind assertion. Number 6. The connotations. The connotation is the emotional meaning associated with the word. Persuasive editorial writers often choose their words carefully so that the connotation suits their purpose. For example, kill and slaughter, health issue versus health crisis, terrorist versus freedom fighter. Connotation, it is a person's positive and negative associations to something and the emotion around it. Connotations can be negative, neutral, or positive. Words with strongly positive or strongly negative connotations can influence and have an effect on what readers think and feel. I really appreciate ABS, CBN, and GMA because they choose their words carefully, unlike Rappler. Next, number 7, the analogy. This is a form of reasoning which compares one thing with another in order to make a particular point. For example, school is like a prison, and students are like prisoners. Analogy helps to persuade, making it easier for clients to make decisions. And analogy is more of a logical argument. Number 8, we have the generalizations. Generalizations make sweeping statements about a whole group based on only one or two members of that group. This can be persuasive if the readers believe the generalization is appropriate but can also undermine argument if they do not. For example, a teacher might see one or two teenagers cheating in class Sampaguita and write a letter to the editor claiming all students in class Sampaguita are cheaters and cannot be trusted. Generalization is something that are exploited and often used in media text to persuade people to believing a certain point of view. It is also capture a big idea but glosses over the details. Next is we have the humor. The use of humor such as puns, irony, sarcasm, satire, and jokes can be persuasive by dismissing opposing views, providing a more engaging and friendly tone, and sway an audience by having them enter into the joke. For example, when talking about controversial art, instead of totally outraged, they can say that totally outraged. And Malice in the Wonderland as a pun of Alice in the Wonderland. Humor is a favored tool among orators because it can help to emphasize a point and make a speech easier to follow. And studies shows that repetition of a phrase can convince people of its truth. Next, number 10, the repetition. By repeating letters, words, and phrases, the author can reinforce an argument and ensure that the point of view being made stays in the reader's mind. For example, Now is the time to amend the student manual. Now is the time to arrange the student system. Now is the time for student development. Yes, now is the time. Number 11, we have the hyperbole. The use of hyperbole emphasizes points by exaggerating. It can be used to mock opposing opinions as a shock tactics technique or an appeal to fears. For example, one presidential candidate said that when he becomes the president, every Filipino will eat 3 times. Yes, with his record and background marred by corruption and plunder cases, every Filipino might just eat 3 times a week. Hyperbole can be used for comedic effect or persuasive reasons. It helps to emphasize your point by overstressing the qualities involved. Number 12, we have the alliteration and assonance. The repetition of initial consonant sounds, which is the alliteration, or vowel sounds, which is the assonance, adds emphasis to major points and makes them more memorable. Lastly, we have the imagery and figurative language. The use of figurative language, such as metaphor and simile, can paint a word picture for audience, making the point visually or may appeal to emotions. They can also make the editorial writer appear sophisticated or well-spoken. So now let's go to letters to the editor. The letters to the editor, they may be in response to something the newspaper has printed in an earlier issue, or they may be in response to something going on in the school or local community that is causing some concern. When readers submit letters, it is a healthy sign for the newspaper, and that shows that they are actually reading the newspaper and are using the op-ed pages as they should be used as a public forum. Letters to the editor serve 2 main purposes: the post-publication peer review and sharing experiences with fellow readers. Both are equally important in maintaining journals' high standards. Indexing needs to be improved, otherwise valuable comment does not endure while original manuscript's message lives on. So next, we have here the sample editorial with analysis. So we have here the sample editorial, which is the Vandals. So let me read the editorial. The walls of Mavuyok State College have a new coat of paint and are presently clean. Whether they retain their present state of cleanliness depends almost entirely on the students. The first spots appeared as a result of negligent students learning against the walls and scraping the soles of their shoes on them. Some students have also taken a peculiar delight in making long pencils scrolls on the walls as they go to classes. The Student Government Council revealed that 6 out of 10 buildings are written with unnecessary statements. What will our visitors say? According to an observant parent, Emisians, more than any other group of students, abuse their buildings. This report, whether true or otherwise, should observe as a challenge. So now let's read the analysis. So as we observe that in the first paragraph, the first sentence talks about the news peg or the introduction of the issue, while the next sentence gives the position of the paper. Is the cleanliness of the walls paintings depend on the behavior of the students. Next, the body paragraphs. The second paragraph talks about the evidence about the negligence of students in taking care of the newly painted buildings. On the other hand, the third paragraph employs persuasive techniques such as presenting statistics from authorities and asking for rhetorical questions. Next is we have the conclusion. As discussed above, editorial endings should be short, witty, and simple such that they can propel a challenge to the students. In that way, the editorial writer just employed a question that makes the reader hanging, giving them the responsibility to act on their answers. So now let's tackle the sample editorials. So we have here the wrong priority. By the way, I will not going to read the whole content of this editorial, but I will give you some insight about it. Wrong Priority talks about the two media company giants in the country namely ABS-CBN and GMA Network. In ABS-CBN, there is Pastillas Girl in Advice Ganda. Angelica Yap, also known as Pastillas Girl, is a social media darling who became famous in her how to make a pastillas recipe in which she incorporated hugot lines. In GMA, they have Aldab, which is the accidental love team of Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza, aka Yaya Dab. The management saw the potential into and has become paired up in the first ever Kalyeserye in Philippine television. Before being a TV star, Maine Mendoza is known as the queen of Philippine dub smash when her videos dub smashing Chris Aquino became viral in social media and YouTube. In ABS-CBN, they have Search for Mr. Pastillas or Nasaan Ka Mr. Pastillas. In GMA, they have the Pabebe Wave of Maine Mendoza. I guess that's the end of our report, and I hope you learned something today. Thank you and God bless us all.